saw him coming down the mountain, but he never reached the base. I watched his figure against the rocks, climbing down as if nothing was wrong. But every time I blinked, he was back higher up, starting all over again. I realized then I wasn't watching a man. I was watching something replay itself over and over. If this happened to you, what would you do? Before we get into the full story, kindly give this video a like. It really helps YouTube show it to more people who love scary stories like you. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one if you genuinely like what I do here. Turn on post notification too if you want to get notified when I send a gift your way. Also, tell me where you're watching from and what time is it there. Now turn on the fan to have that soothing background hum while you listen. Story 1. I had always dreamed of climbing Mount LeConte. It wasn't Everest or K2, but it had a reputation that called to me. Mist-drenched mornings, long ridges where clouds swallowed the trail, and a strange silence that hikers always mentioned afterward. I booked a cabin nearby and told myself this would be a solo climb. No friends, no group, just me and the mountain. I arrived in the afternoon, the smell of wet pine thick in the air, the distant rush of a stream somewhere down the slope. Felt peaceful, like stepping into a postcard. I laid out my gear, tightened my boots, and looked at the ridge glowing orange under the setting sun. That was when I noticed the first odd thing. A small carved sign, nailed to a tree by the trailhead. It didn't say "Welcome" or "Trail starts here." It only had 3 words burned into the wood. Don't look down. At first, I thought it was some kind of inside joke from locals, maybe a warning about the steep drops. I shrugged it off and started the climb. The air was cool, the kind of crisp that fills your lungs and makes you feel stronger. The trail twisted through mossy rocks and patches of ferns. Birds darted across the path, and somewhere far above, I could hear the wind brushing against the cliffs. For the first hour, everything was calm, almost meditative. The rhythm of my boots on dirt, the occasional crunch of gravel, the steady upward pull. It was the kind of climb that clears your head. But then I noticed something strange. I wasn't alone. A figure moved ahead of me, climbing with steady precision. He wore a dark jacket and had a rope strapped to his pack. Nothing unusual except I hadn't seen anyone at the trailhead, and no one had passed me. I called out, just a friendly "hey," but he didn't turn. He just kept climbing. His movements were mechanical, practiced, like someone who had done this route hundreds of times. I slowed my pace, watching him. The trail wound left, and when I rounded the bend, he was gone. No sign of footsteps, no scrape of boots on stone, just emptiness. I stood there, listening, waiting for some sign of him ahead. A loose rock, a cough, anything. But the mountain gave me nothing. That was the first disturbance, the moment the climb stopped feeling like mine and started feeling borrowed. I pushed on, convincing myself he had taken a side path I hadn't noticed. The trail narrowed, cutting along the cliff edge where the drop seemed endless. That was when I saw him again. Higher this time, maybe 50 feet above me. He moved exactly as before, each step measured, each handhold perfect. And then, in the blink of an eye, he was gone again. Not over a ridge, not hidden by a tree, just gone. My chest tightened, and I told myself I was just tired. Climbing alone plays tricks on the mind. But I couldn't shake it. The way he vanished didn't feel like a mistake. Felt rehearsed. I kept climbing. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long across the rocks. I told myself I'd turn back soon, but the summit pulled at me. That's when it escalated. I heard the rope first, the sound of it dragging, brushing against stone, like someone preparing to rappel. I looked up. He was there again. Only this time he wasn't climbing. He was descending, slowly, hand over hand, the rope swinging slightly in the wind. I stared, hypnotized, watching him make his way down. Step by step, closer and closer, until he should have reached the ledge I stood on. But he didn't. The rope swayed, touched the ground, but the climber never appeared. I craned my neck, heart hammering, scanning the cliff above. The rope hung there, but it was empty. No man, no gear, just the frayed end twisting in the air. I backed away, the stone beneath my boots loose and treacherous. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe altitude was messing with me. But when I looked again, the rope was gone too. Not pulled up, not cut loose, just gone. Darkness settled fast. The trail behind me felt longer, unfamiliar, as though I had already lost the way back. I pressed on toward the summit, half out of stubbornness, half out of fear of turning back into the dark. Every corner, every ridge, I expected to see him again. And I did, over and over. Sometimes ahead of me, sometimes above me, sometimes crouched on a ledge, waiting, always moving, always climbing, always repeating. By the time I reached the summit, my legs trembled with exhaustion. The view should have been breathtaking. Layers of mountains fading into the horizon, stars spilling across the sky. But I couldn't look. He was there, just a few feet away now, not climbing, not descending, just standing at the edge, staring out into nothing. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. Slowly, he turned his head toward me, and I swear, I saw nothing where his face should have been. Just a blur, like a photograph smeared by water. Then, before I could move, he stepped forward and vanished into the drop. I stumbled back, gasping, nearly losing my footing. I expected to hear the crash of his body below, but there was nothing, just silence and wind. I ran. I don't even remember descending, only that the trail felt endless, looping, as though I was caught in the same stretch of rock over and over. And every so often, I caught glimpses of him again, climbing, descending, never stopping, never reaching the ground. When I finally made it back to the cabin, I collapsed on the floor, too drained to get move. But the window faced the mountain, and even now I sometimes see him there, a dark figure against the cliff, caught in an endless climb he'll never finish. And I wonder, if I keep looking long enough, will I become part of that loop too? Would you have kept climbing, or turned back the moment he disappeared? Comment below if you think he was real or something else entirely. Story 2. They say if you walk the ridge of Blood Mountain at night, you're not really walking alone. That's what an old hiker told me at the trailhead, his face half hidden by a hood. I laughed at him then, brushing it off as mountain folklore, but when I finally found myself up there, staring into the mist and watching something move where nothing should have been, I realized he wasn't warning me. He was daring me, and I accepted without knowing it. I had gone to Blood Mountain because I wanted solitude. I had just quit my job, left behind a city that felt suffocating, and I thought maybe hiking alone would help me clear my mind. The mountain's name should have been a red flag, but I chalked it up to history, some old battle or superstition. My first day was uneventful. Long stretches of pine forest, the scent of damp leaves, the crunch of my boots keeping me company. At dusk, I set up camp near the ridge, where the land stretched into layers of shadowed peaks. I ate a small dinner, crawled into my sleeping bag, and listened to the soft hum of insects outside. Peaceful, almost too peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that makes you forget the world exists. Sometime after midnight, I woke. Not to a sound exactly, but to a shift. You know that feeling when the room is dark, but you're sure someone else is there? My tent walls glowed faintly from the moonlight, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. Then I saw it. A shadow. Not mine. Not cast by any object in my tent. It moved across the thin fabric, slow and deliberate, like someone walking past. I held my breath, waiting to hear footsteps, waiting for the crunch of gravel. Nothing came, just silence. I told myself it had to be a trick of the moonlight, a tree branch swaying. But when I peeked out, the trees were still. I tried to sleep again, but the feeling of being watched clung to me. When dawn came, I packed up quickly and started along the ridge. That's when I noticed the first real disturbance. The shadows weren't behaving. My own stretched out long across the rocks, but there were others. Too many. I saw shapes cast against the trail, like people walking beside me, ahead of me, behind me. But when I turned, there was no one. The ridge was empty, just me and the rising sun. Still, every step I took, the shadows followed. Sometimes they stretched impossibly tall, bending across the rocks like twisted figures. Sometimes they stayed short and close, as if crowding me. By midday, the ridge narrowed, the path dropping off steeply on either side. I stopped to drink water, and that was when I noticed the strangest thing yet. One of the shadows wasn't moving like the others. While mine shifted naturally with the sun, this one stayed fixed, crouched low as if waiting. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but it didn't change. When I stepped forward, it stayed. When I stepped back, it didn't follow. I felt a wave of unease but forced myself to keep going. It had to be some odd trick of light. Except the higher I climbed, the more wrong it felt. The ridge seemed to darken though the sun was still shining. The shadows stretched farther, now flickering as if alive, twitching in unnatural patterns. I told myself to look straight ahead, to ignore them, but I was curious. I glanced sideways and nearly stumbled. The shadows weren't just stretching across the rocks anymore. They were rising, standing upright, like figures walking beside me, faceless and tall, their limbs impossibly long. I blinked and they were gone. My heart raced. I quickened my pace, eager to reach the summit, but the ridge kept pulling me farther. Each turn looked the same, each rock outcrop repeating like I was walking in circles. The shadows thickened, growing darker even as the sky remained bright. Then came the moment I'll never forget. I stopped to catch my breath, leaning on my knees, when I noticed the ground in front of me. My shadow was there, stretched like it should have been. But behind it, another one stood, clear, tall, arms reaching forward as if about to touch me. I spun around, ready to confront whoever it was. No one, just the empty ridge. But when I looked back down, the shadow was still there, not moving, not fading. Panic clawed at me. I stumbled forward, almost running, hoping to lose whatever was following me. The trail twisted, the drop-offs sharp, and I nearly lost my footing more than once. Every time I dared glance down, the extra shadows were still there. Not one anymore, dozens, surrounding me, crowding closer. Some leaned forward like they were whispering. Some stretched across the trail as if to block me. The ridge felt narrower, the ground tilting beneath my boots, though I knew it was my own panic making it worse. At last, the summit came into view, a rocky clearing with a wide view of the mountains beyond. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. The shadows were waiting. They ringed the summit, unmoving, tall and faceless. My own shadow flickered like it was no longer mine. I couldn't bring myself to step into that circle. My body locked, my throat dry, as the air pressed down. I don't know how long I stood there before I finally turned and ran back down the ridge, refusing to look at the ground, refusing to acknowledge what I knew was following me. When I reached the base hours later, my legs nearly gave out. The sun was dipping low, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. But then I looked at the ground. My shadow was there, alone, normal, but just for a second, I saw another one flicker beside it. Taller, thinner, and I swear it lifted its hand as though waving goodbye, or maybe beckoning me back. Would you have kept going to the summit? Or turn back the moment you saw that extra shadow? Comment below if you think these were tricks of the light or something else entirely. Story 3. If you ever see a rope dangling from a cliff where no climber should be, don't touch it. I made that mistake once on Grandfather Mountain. I thought I was pulling up someone in need. Instead, what I pulled was something I'll never forget, and something I don't think ever left me. I'd gone to Grandfather Mountain on a weekend trip. The weather was crisp, the sky cloudless, and the trail promised views that stretched for miles. I wasn't an experienced climber, but I loved challenging hikes, and the idea of scaling ladders and cables to reach the higher ledges thrilled me. The morning felt calm and safe. Families took photos at the lower bridges. Kids laughed as they tossed rocks into the creeks, and even the air smelled alive, full of pine and clean earth. Nothing about that day suggested danger. By late afternoon, most hikers had turned back, and the trail grew quiet. I liked it that way, less chatter, more room to think. The sun slanted low, turning the rocks gold, and the wind carried a low whistle across the ridge. I climbed carefully, gripping each rung of the ladders, moving steadily higher. That's when I saw it. A rope, thick, frayed, dangling from the edge of a ledge above me. It swayed slightly in the wind, brushing against the stone. I frowned. There hadn't been any mention of an extra rope in the guide I'd read. The trail was maintained with ladders and cables, not stray ropes. Yet here it was, hanging there like an invitation. I scanned the ledge above but saw no one. No voices, no clinking gear, no movement. Just the rope swinging. My first thought was that maybe a climber had gotten stuck or worse, fallen. I called out, my voice bouncing across the rocks. Hello? Anyone up there? Nothing. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Still, my gut told me to check. Maybe someone needed help. I reached for the rope, fingers brushing the coarse fibers. It felt cold, damp, as though it had been there for hours. I tugged gently, testing its weight. To my surprise, it resisted. Something on the other end was pulling back, steady but light, like someone weakly holding on. My pulse quickened. Hey, I've got you. Hold on. I wrapped the rope around my wrist and pulled harder. It slid downward, inch by inch, heavy now, like I was lifting more than just a person. My arms strained, my boots digging into the stone. Sweat stung my eyes as I heaved, expecting to see a head, a hand, something emerge over the ledge. But nothing appeared. The rope kept coming, yard after yard, coiling at my feet. No knots, no harness, just rope. And then suddenly it was gone. One moment it was taut, pulling back against me, and the next, it snapped free like it had never been tied to anything. I stumbled backward, nearly falling, clutching the useless length that now lay limp on the rocks. My breath came in ragged gasps. I peered up, half expecting someone to peek over the edge, but there was only the wind. The ledge above remained empty. I dropped the rope, but when I looked again, it was gone. Not coiled at my feet, not trailing down the rock, just gone as if it had never been there. My skin prickled. I told myself to keep climbing, to reach the summit before nightfall, but unease dug deep into me. Each step felt heavier, each shadow stretched longer. I forced myself upward, gripping the ladders tightly, refusing to look down. Yet halfway to the next ledge, my hand brushed against something familiar. Rope, dangling again, right in front of me, swaying gently in the breeze. I froze, staring. It was the same rope, same frayed edges, same damp weight when I touched it. My stomach churned. I didn't pull this time. I just held it, waiting. And then I felt it. A tug. Slow. Insistent. Something was on the other end, pulling down, trying to drag me with it. My grip slipped, panic clawing at my chest. I let go, jerking my hand back. The rope swung free, twisting in the air before vanishing right before my eyes. Not dropped, not cut, vanished. My climb turned frantic. I wanted nothing more than to get off that mountain. But grandfather doesn't let go easily. The higher I went, the more often the rope appeared. Always dangling just out of reach, always swaying as though someone was waiting for me to grab it. Sometimes I heard the faint sound of rope scraping against stone, like something being hauled up. Other times, it brushed against my shoulder, cold and wet, though the wind was still. My breaths came short, shallow, my mind spinning with questions I didn't want answers to. By the time I reached the summit, I was shaking. The view stretched endlessly, rolling mountains, fading light, but I couldn't enjoy it. Behind me, I heard it again. Ropes sliding, fibers tightening, as though someone was climbing up after me. I turned. Nothing. Just bare rock and sky. But when I looked down, I saw it one last time. The rope dangled from the ledge below, and at the very end of it, a hand clutched the fibers. Pale, motionless, holding on without ever climbing higher. I blinked, and it was gone. The rope, the hand, all of it. Just empty space. I left the summit as quickly as I could, half stumbling down the trail until my legs nearly gave out. Even when I reached the bottom, the mountain looming behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling. Sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still feel the pull on my arms, the weight dragging against me, as though the rope is waiting to appear again. Would you have pulled the rope all the way, or walked past without touching it? Comment below if you think it was just my mind playing tricks, or something the mountain wanted me to see. Story 4. They call it the Death Ledge for a reason, but no one ever tells you why. Guides mention it casually, like it's just another part of the climb. Hikers whisper about it at trailheads, glancing nervously at the peak. I thought it was an exaggeration, a name born from folklore and caution. But when I stood on that narrow ledge, with the drop yawning beneath me and something whispering just out of sight, I realized the name wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Mount Mitchell had always fascinated me. The highest peak east of the Mississippi, towering above the Blue Ridge, wrapped in its own weather system. I told myself it would be an easy challenge, more of a bragging right than a true test. That morning, the trail looked harmless. Wet leaves scattered across dirt, the steady hum of wind in the trees, the faint scent of pine and moss clinging to everything. Families were out, couples walking hand in hand, kids chasing each other along the path. I passed them one by one, feeling stronger with every step, as if the mountain wanted me to keep going. By noon, the crowds thinned, the trail steepened, the trees grew denser, and the chatter of hikers faded behind me. I liked it that way. The solitude made the climb feel personal, like I was peeling away the layers of noise from my life. The rhythm of my boots on rock, the sound of my own breath, it became almost hypnotic. I stopped to drink water, watching clouds roll across the ridge, casting shadows that swallowed whole sections of the forest. That was when I first saw it. The ledge, narrow, jagged, just wide enough for one person to cross. It jutted out over the cliffside, a strip of stone that looked like it had been placed there as a dare. I hesitated. There were other routes, safer ones, but the path to the summit cut straight across it. I stepped closer, testing the stone with the toe of my boot. Solid, no cracks. Still, the drop on either side was dizzying. The valley stretched so far down it looked endless, like falling would never stop. I took a deep breath and started across. Halfway there, I noticed something odd. My shadow. It stretched long in front of me, just as it should have, but another one overlapped it. Taller, broader. It moved when I moved, but not in sync. A fraction too slow, like it was following me instead of belonging to me. I froze, staring at the stone beneath me, but the ledge offered no explanation. The air shifted, a gust of wind pushing against my back. I steadied myself, telling myself it was just fatigue, my eyes playing tricks. But then I heard it, a whisper, not words exactly, but a low murmur, rising from the drop below. My skin prickled as I leaned slightly over the edge, half expecting to see climbers far beneath me. There was nothing, just clouds drifting lazily through the valley. Yet the whispering grew louder, circling me, as though the ledge itself was speaking. I pressed forward, quickening my steps, eager to reach the other side. But the mountain wasn't finished with me. The stone shifted under my boot, not enough to collapse, but enough to jolt my balance. My hands shot out, scraping against the rough rock wall. My pulse raced as I steadied myself. When I looked down, I saw something that stopped me cold. A handprint, fresh, pressed into the dust on the ledge, just inches ahead of me. It hadn't been there before. The fingers were long, stretched unnaturally wide, as if whoever made them hadn't been entirely human. I staggered back a step, my heel almost slipping over the edge. The whispering swelled, sharper now, almost urgent. I forced myself forward, stepping past the handprint, refusing to look down again. Every few feet, more marks appeared. Handprints, footprints, pressed into the stone like someone had crawled across the ledge on all fours. My stomach churned as I realized the pattern led straight toward me, as if whatever made them had been moving in my direction. By the time I reached the far side, my body shook with adrenaline. I collapsed against the rock wall, gasping, refusing to look back at the ledge. But curiosity won. I turned. The ledge stretched empty, quiet, bathed in sunlight. No prints, no shadows but mine. No whispers, just bare stone. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. Maybe I was dehydrated. Maybe the altitude was messing with me. I forced myself upward, determined to finish the climb. But the mountain wasn't done. Hours later, as dusk settled over the summit, I stood at the peak, staring out at the rolling sea of mountains fading into darkness. The view should have felt triumphant. Instead, my stomach nodded. Behind me, faint at first, came the scrape of stone. I spun around. Nothing. Just the summit rocks and the empty trail. Then I heard it again, closer this time. A dragging sound, like fingers scraping along stone. I backed away, every nerve on fire. And then I saw it. At the far end of the summit trail, the ledge appeared again. Not the real one below, but an exact replica, hanging in the air like a mirage. Narrow, jagged, stretching into nothing, and crawling across it, hands gripping, legs dragging, was a figure made entirely of shadow. It moved slowly, its body twisting unnaturally, as though every joint bent the wrong way. I watched, frozen, as it reached the middle of the ledge and stopped. Slowly, its head turned toward me. Though it had no face, I felt its attention lock on me like a weight. The vision vanished, just gone. I stood alone on the summit, trembling. But when I made my way down hours later, exhausted and terrified, I couldn't shake the feeling that the ledge had followed me. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see it stretched out before me, waiting for me to take that first step again. And sometimes, late at night, I hear it, the scraping of stone, the faint whispering calling me back. Would you have crossed the ledge? Or turned back the moment you saw that first handprint? Comment below if you think the Death Ledge is just a dangerous trail, or something much darker tied to the mountain. Story 5. Clingman's Dome is the tallest point in the Great Smoky Mountains. On clear days, you can see for miles. Blue hills stacked like waves, forests rolling into the horizon, and clouds drifting below your feet. People love to hike up there, to stand on the tower at the top and feel like they're touching the sky. But not all who hike there come back the same. Some return with stories they cannot explain. Some never return at all. I didn't believe any of that. I thought Clingman's Dome was just another tourist stop, a place for photos and fresh air. That's why, one cool autumn morning, I decided to hike alone before the crowds came. The trees blazed red and gold. The air smelled of pine and damp leaves, and the sky above looked painted. Everything felt peaceful at first. The trail was quiet except for the crunch of my boots. The slope grew steeper as I climbed, and the mist began to roll in, soft and gray. It wrapped around the trees, made them look taller, stranger, almost alive. I pulled my jacket tighter. The higher I went, the quieter it got. No birds, no squirrels, just silence. That was when I noticed him. At first, he looked like any other hiker, tall, thin, wearing a dark coat. He stood a little way ahead on the trail, turned slightly toward me. His face was pale, almost too pale, but I told myself it was just the fog. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood there, waiting. I called out, "Morning," but he gave no answer. I walked closer, trying to be friendly, but as I drew near, he stepped back, further into the mist. It was strange, like he wanted me to follow. My stomach told me not to, but my feet kept moving. Something about him pulled me forward, even as the fog grew so thick I could barely see. Finally, he stopped at a bend where the trail hugged a cliffside. He turned fully toward me, and that's when I saw his eyes. They were wide, dark, filled with something I can only call warning. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He raised one hand, slowly pointing ahead. My chest tightened. I turned my head to see what he pointed at. The ground. Just a few feet in front of me, the dirt trail ended. Not a gentle slope, not a side path, just nothing. The earth had crumbled away, leaving a sheer drop into the trees below. If I had kept walking in the fog, I would have stepped right off. My legs wobbled. I stepped back, heart racing. When I turned to thank him, he was gone. The mist cleared a little, just enough to show me I was alone. I stood there shaking, trying to convince myself I had imagined him. But when I looked down at the dirt where he had stood, I saw footprints. Fresh ones, deeper than mine. They led to the cliff's edge and stopped. I stumbled back, panic rising. The only thought in my head was to get off the mountain. I turned and hurried down the trail, but the fog seemed to thicken again. wrapping around me like a blanket. Every few steps, I felt eyes on me, like someone was just behind my shoulder. I refused to look back. My hands trembled. My breath came fast. Then, from the mist, I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, following mine. I stopped. The sound stopped too. I walked again. The sound followed. Louder, closer. I spun around, desperate to catch whoever it was. Nothing, just gray mist. My chest pounded so hard I thought I would faint. I forced myself onward. Finally, the trees thinned, and I saw the parking lot below. Relief washed over me. I hurried down the last stretch, my boots slipping on wet leaves. But before I stepped off the trail, I felt it. Cold air on the back of my neck, colder than the fog, colder than the mountain air. A whisper brushed past my ear. 2 words. Don't return. I bolted to my car, slamming the door, locking it as if locks could stop whatever was out there. I sat for a long time, staring at the trail, waiting for someone, anyone, to come out. But no one did. The parking lot was empty. Weeks later, I told a ranger what happened. He listened quietly, then nodded like he had heard it before. Finally, he said, "You're not the first." He told me hikers sometimes see a man on that trail. A tall man in a dark coat. He never speaks, but he always warns. Some say he was a hiker himself years ago who got lost in the fog and stepped right off the cliff. Now, his spirit walks the trail, making sure no one else shares his fate. I wanted to believe the ranger was joking, just humoring me. But when I asked if anyone had died there, his face grew serious. "More than a few," he said, "and most on foggy mornings, just like the one you described. I haven't been back since. I don't plan to, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see his face in the fog, pale, silent, warning, and I hear his whisper again, 'Don't return.' Would you have followed him through the mist, or turned back the moment you saw him? Tell me below. Do you think he's a guardian spirit, or something darker that keeps people from leaving the mountain?" Story 6. Mount Rogers is the tallest mountain in Virginia. People go there for the wild ponies, the green fields, and the strange quiet beauty of the high country. I went there once in the middle of winter. I thought it would be peaceful, just me, the snow, and the silence. I never expected to leave with a memory that still makes my skin crawl whenever I think of it. That morning, the sky was gray and heavy. The air was sharp and cold, the kind of cold that makes your breath look like smoke. My boots crunched over frozen ground, and the trees were coated in white. It was so quiet I could hear the tiny snap of ice breaking on branches as the sun touched them. I felt brave, even proud of myself, walking alone in that kind of weather. At first, everything seemed fine. The trail wound through patches of forest and open fields, and I stopped now and then to watch the ponies. They stood like statues, their manes stiff with frost, their dark eyes calm. I felt safe watching them. I even laughed once when one snorted and shook snow off its back like a dog shaking off water. But then I noticed something odd. The snow around one patch of trees looked strange. Not smooth like the rest, but disturbed, like someone had dragged their hands through it again and again. The lines were too small for animal tracks, too neat. They looked like fingers pressing into the snow, stretching out in long trails. I told myself it was just melting ice sliding down from the branches. I kept walking. Still, the image stayed in my mind. Fingers. Long, cold fingers. The higher I climbed, the colder it got. The air stung my nose and cheeks, and I had to keep blowing into my hands to warm them. But soon, I realized it wasn't just the normal cold. My gloves felt damp, though I hadn't touched anything wet. And then, something stranger. My hands felt heavy, almost weighed down. I shook them out, thinking I was just tired, but the heaviness didn't go away. I kept going, and that was when I heard it. A soft sound behind me. Not footsteps, not wind. It was the sound of something dragging. Slow, steady. I turned quickly. Nothing but snow and trees. My stomach tightened. I walked faster. The sound followed. Drag, drag, drag. At the next bend, I stopped again and turned around. Still nothing. But in the snow behind me, I saw marks. Not boot prints, those were mine. These were wider, smoother, like something had been pulled along the ground. My chest squeezed tight. I didn't like it, but I didn't want to turn back. I told myself I could make it to the shelter near the top. As I walked, the dragging sound grew closer. Then came something else, a feeling. At first, it was like someone brushing past my sleeve. Light, quick. I yanked my arm back, spinning around. But again, nothing was there. I hurried on, but the touches grew stronger. A tug at my backpack, a brush against my side. Then finally, something icy closed around my wrist. I cried out, stumbling forward. My wrist burned from the cold grip, but when I looked, nothing held me. Just the faint print of a hand pressed into the frost on my glove. My breath caught. I tore the glove off, and my skin was red and raw, like frostbite had spread in seconds. I ran. My boots pounded through the snow, my breath coming fast. Behind me, I heard it again, the dragging sound, but now quicker, chasing me. I didn't dare look back. All I wanted was to reach the shelter. At last, the wooden outline of the shelter appeared through the trees. I ran inside, slamming the door even though I knew doors couldn't stop what was chasing me. I pressed my back against the wall, shaking, waiting. The dragging sound stopped. Silence fell. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then the temperature dropped. My breath came out in thick clouds. The wood walls creaked as if groaning from the cold. And then, from the shadows in the corner of the shelter, I saw it. Hands, pale, bluish, thin as branches. Dozens of them reaching out of nothing. They stretched across the floor, the walls, even the ceiling. They dragged themselves forward, fingertips scraping against the wood, leaving long, icy streaks. I pressed myself against the far wall, whispering, "Please, no." The hands reached for me. Some brushed against my boots. Some touched my jacket. One slid across my cheek, freezing my skin. My tears turned to ice on my face. I thought I was done for. Then, just as suddenly, the hands pulled back. They slid away into the shadows, disappearing one by one until the shelter was empty again. The air warmed, not much, but enough that I could move. I sat there all night, too afraid to leave. When the sun finally rose, the shelter looked normal again. No marks on the wood. No frost, but the usual kind. Only one thing proved it wasn't a dream. My wrist. The skin was still raw and scarred where the cold grip had held me. Later, I told a local hiker about what I saw. He nodded like he already knew. He said people on Mount Rogers sometimes talk about the frozen hands. Some say they belong to hikers who died in winter storms, their bodies never found. Others say the mountain itself reaches out, trying to keep those who wander too far in the snow. I don't know what they were. I only know what I felt. And I know this, if you ever hike Mount Rogers in the winter, don't go alone. And if you feel a cold touch on your wrist, don't look back. Just run. Would you have kept walking when you saw the finger marks in the snow? Or turned back right then? Tell me. Do you think those hands wanted to hurt me? Or were they just trying to drag me into the cold forever? Story 7. The Rhone Highlands are known for their beauty. Wide grassy balds cover the mountain tops, rolling like green waves under the sky. In summer, rhododendrons bloom in bright colors. In winter, the winds blow hard and cold, making the whole place feel empty and endless. People call it peaceful. Some call it magical. But if you listen closely, the wind up there doesn't always sound like wind. Sometimes it sounds like voices. I first heard about it from an old hiker. He told me, if you ever camp on Rhone Mountain and hear the wind speak, don't answer back. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but the look in his eyes was serious. He didn't laugh at all. A few weeks later, I decided to see it for myself. I packed my tent and sleeping bag, hiked up through the woods, and reached the grassy balds just before dark. The view was amazing. Hills rolled in every direction. The sky turned pink, then purple, then black, dotted with stars. I set up my tent, cooked some noodles on my little stove, and felt proud of myself for camping alone. The night was calm at first. I lay in my tent, listening to the steady flap of the fabric in the breeze. I thought I would sleep easily, but then the wind grew stronger. It whistled across the grass, slipped under the tent walls, and brushed against my ears. First, it was just noise, but soon the noise changed. It began to sound like words. Soft words, faint, carried on the gusts. I sat up, heart thumping. The voices were gentle, almost kind, like someone humming or whispering a lullaby. I told myself it was just the wind, just my tired brain making shapes out of noise. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone stood outside my tent, speaking in low tones. I unzipped the flap and peeked out. No one was there, just the grassy bald, bending under the moonlight, moving in waves with the wind. I zipped it shut again and lay back down. That's when I heard it clearer. A voice, a woman's voice. She said my name, plain, clear, as if she stood right outside. I bolted upright. My name. No one knew I was there. I had told no one my plans. My mouth went dry. I whispered back, "Who's there?" The wind answered, not with a name but with laughter. Soft, drawn-out laughter that rose and fell with the gusts. It wasn't happy laughter. It was the kind that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I pressed my hands over my ears, rocking back and forth, telling myself it wasn't real. But the sound slipped through, curling into my head like smoke. The voices multiplied. Now it wasn't just one woman. It was many. Some low, some high, some angry, some sad. They overlapped, whispered, laughed, cried, all at once. I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped out of my tent, boots crunching the frosty grass. The wind hit me full in the face, cold and wild. And then I saw them. Shapes, dozens of them. Not solid, but not fully gone either. Like the wind itself had taken form. They drifted in circles across the bald. Long arms stretched wide, hair floating, faces pale and empty. Their mouths moved, but no sound came directly from them. The sound came from the air, twisting around me, filling me with dread. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over my tent ropes. The figures drifted closer, their mouths opening wider, their words sharper now. They spoke of things I couldn't understand, broken phrases, warnings, promises. One voice rose above the rest. "Stay with us," it said. "Stay forever." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "No," I whispered, but the wind whipped my words away, swallowed them. The figures pressed closer, their shapes bending and twisting in the storm. One reached for me, her hand thin as smoke but colder than ice when it brushed my arm. My skin burned where she touched me, red welts forming instantly. I screamed and yanked away, stumbling back into my tent. I collapsed inside, pulling the sleeping bag over my head like a child hiding from monsters. The voices swirled around the tent, circling, growing louder, sharper. I shut my eyes tight, whispering prayers, begging them to stop. Finally, after what felt like hours, the wind began to calm. The voices faded. The figures thinned and vanished into the dark. When I woke, the morning sun was bright and warm. My tent flapped gently in the soft breeze, harmless again. The grassy bald looked peaceful, quiet, like nothing had happened. If not for the marks on my arm, long red streaks that burned when I touched them, I would have thought it was only a nightmare. I packed quickly, almost tearing my tent as I yanked the stakes out. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't stop to take pictures. I ran down the trail as fast as my boots would carry me. Later, I told another hiker about what happened. He didn't laugh. He nodded slowly and said, "People have heard the voices for years. Some think they're the spirits of travelers who got lost on the balds and froze in the winter storms. The wind keeps their words alive. If you answer, they know you can hear them. And once they know, they don't stop. I haven't camped there since, and I never will. But sometimes, when the night is windy, I sit up in bed, certain I hear whispers outside my window, faint, almost lost in the breeze. Sometimes they say my name. Would you have answered the wind when it called you? Or would you have stayed silent all night? Tell me, do you think those voices were trying to trick me? Or were they really lost souls calling for company?" Story 8. Black Balsam Knob is one of those mountain tops where the trees fade away, and you're left standing in wide, open space. Grass rolls across the bald, and the stars shine brighter than anywhere else in the Blue Ridge. Feels free, open, and safe. At least, that's what I thought before the night I saw a tent vanish before my eyes. I had gone up there with a friend named Caleb. We both loved camping, and we wanted a spot where we could see the whole sky. The air was cool, and the breeze smelled of grass and wildflowers. We found a flat place near the trail, pitched our tents side by side, and sat out watching the sunset. The sky burned orange, then purple, then dark blue. We joked, ate our snacks, and finally crawled into our tents when the chill set in. The night was quiet at first. I lay in my sleeping bag, staring at the thin fabric glowing under the moonlight. I could hear Caleb shifting in his tent, zipping and unzipping his bag. Then silence. I drifted off, thinking it would be an easy night. But something woke me. I don't know what. Maybe a sound. Maybe nothing at all. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, and noticed something strange. The flap of Caleb's tent was open, just a small gap, swaying in the wind. I thought maybe he'd stepped out to use the bathroom, but when I whispered his name, no one answered. I waited a while, then unzipped my own tent and poked my head out. The moon lit up the bald, silver grass waving like water. But Caleb's tent, it looked wrong. It wasn't just the flap now. The whole tent seemed lighter, fainter, like the color had drained out of it. I stood up, heart thumping, and walked closer. My boots pressed the grass flat, but Caleb's tent didn't move in the breeze. It looked like a shadow of a tent, thin and fading. I called again. Caleb? No answer. My voice sounded too loud, like the mountain swallowed it whole. I stepped closer and reached out. My hand went right through the fabric. Not like pushing through cloth, like pushing through smoke. I gasped, jerking my hand back. The tent shimmered, wavered, then began to fold in on itself, piece by piece. The poles bent without a sound. The walls crumpled, and then, in seconds, it was gone. Just empty grass where it had stood. I froze, staring at the ground. Caleb's bag, his boots, even his flashlight, everything was gone with it. No trace left, like he had never been there. Fear flooded me. I ran back to my tent, zipped it shut, and curled into my bag, whispering to myself that I was dreaming. But the ground under me still felt real. The air still stung my nose. And when I closed my eyes, I heard it. Faint zipper sound. Not mine. Not near me. Somewhere out on the bald. Then another. And another. Like tents opening and closing in the dark. All around me. I pressed my hands to my ears, shaking, but the sounds grew louder. I heard footsteps now, soft in the grass. Voices, two low murmurs, words I couldn't make out. They circled my tent, moving slow, almost playful. I wanted to run, but I didn't dare unzip the flap. Then, right beside me, I heard Caleb's voice. Clear, calm. He said, "Come out. It's better here." My breath stopped. I wanted to answer, but something in me knew it wasn't him. It didn't sound wrong, not exactly, but empty, like someone had learned his voice but didn't understand how to use it. I whispered, "No," my lips trembling. Silence fell. For a moment I thought they were gone. Then the ground under my tent shivered, like someone had yanked the stakes loose. The walls sagged inward, pressing toward me. I held the poles up with my arms, whispering prayers, crying. The pressure built, heavier, stronger, until I thought the whole tent would collapse. Then nothing. The walls popped back into place. The night grew quiet again. I stayed awake until the sky turned gray with dawn. When I finally unzipped the flap, the bald looked peaceful, empty, harmless. No voices, no footsteps, no tents. I searched the grass where Caleb's tent had been. Nothing. Not a stake hole. Not a scrap of cloth. No footprints. Just smooth grass swaying in the breeze. I ran down the mountain, leaving everything behind. I didn't stop until I reached the parking lot, where the world felt solid again. No one has ever found Caleb. His family asked questions, police searched, but there were no answers. They said maybe he wandered off, got lost. But I know what I saw. His tent didn't blow away. It didn't collapse. It vanished. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind rattles my windows, I hear the faint sound of a zipper. Slow, careful, and I wonder if one night, my own bed, my own room will fade just like Caleb's tent. Would you have unzipped your tent when you heard your friend's voice? Or would you have stayed hidden like I did? Tell me, do you think the mountain took him? Or was it something waiting on the bald all along? Story 9. I have always loved walking the Appalachian Trail. It is long, wide, and full of trees that whisper in the wind. People say it is one of the most beautiful trails in America. But some parts of it are quiet in a way that makes you feel watched. That is where my story comes from. I had been walking for hours, my backpack heavy on my shoulders. The sun was going down, painting the sky orange and pink. The trees looked like black shadows against the fading light. I stopped to drink water and eat a snack. That was when I felt it for the first time. Someone was watching me. First, I laughed at myself. The woods always feel alive when the sun is setting. Every sound is louder. Every shadow is darker. I shook it off and kept walking. But the feeling didn't go away. It got stronger. I told myself, maybe it's just a deer, or maybe another hiker is behind me. But when I turned to look, the trail was empty. Just trees. Just silence. The path twisted and dipped. As I walked, I began to notice something strange. Every time I passed a tree with a knot, I saw the same thing. A shadow that didn't belong. It looked like a person standing just behind the tree, peeking out. But when I blinked, the shadow was gone. I walked faster. The woods grew darker. The trail markers were harder to see. I kept telling myself I would set up camp soon. But then I heard it, soft footsteps. Not mine. They were behind me, slow, careful, matching my pace. I spun around. Nothing. The trail stretched back, empty. I could even see my own footprints in the dirt, but no one else's. I tried to laugh again. You're tired. You're imagining things. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I kept moving. My boots crunched the dirt. My backpack straps squeaked. Then, behind me, I heard the sound again, crunch, squeak, crunch. I froze. The footsteps froze too. My heart beat so loud it hurt my ears. Slowly, I took one step forward. Crunch. Behind me, another crunch. I wasn't alone. The shadows grew long as the last of the sun slipped away. My hands shook as I pulled out my flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, landing on tree trunks, rocks, and low bushes. Nothing. But when I turned the light toward the bend in the trail, I saw it. A figure, tall, thin, standing too still to be human. It wasn't walking. It wasn't breathing. It was just there. I froze, unable to blink. The figure was dark, darker than the trees. It had no face, but I could feel it looking at me. I raised my light higher, and in that moment, it stepped behind a tree. Gone. My throat went dry. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. My legs finally moved and I ran. I didn't care about the weight on my back. I didn't care about the trail markers. I just ran. The footsteps ran too. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I ran, they ran. I left the trail and crashed through bushes and branches. Thorns tore my skin, but I didn't stop. I needed to get away. I needed to lose it. Finally, I found a small clearing and fell to the ground, gasping. My flashlight beam shook as I pointed it around. No figure, no sound, just the night. I told myself I had escaped. I told myself it was over. Then I looked at the ground. In the dirt, next to my own messy footprints, was another set. Not boots, not shoes, bare feet. The prints were long, narrow, and pressed deep, as if whoever made them was heavy. They circled around me, as if it had been walking while I rested. I turned off my light. Maybe if I stayed quiet, it would go away. But in the darkness, I heard breathing. Not mine. Slow. Deep. Right behind me. I wanted to scream, but my voice broke. I turned the flashlight back on, my hands trembling. The light swung across the trees, across the footprints, and then it landed on the figure. Closer this time. Only a few feet away. I couldn't move. My body refused to obey. The figure stood there, leaning slightly, like it was curious. I saw no eyes, no mouth, nothing. Just the shape of a man made of shadows. Then it raised its hand. Not to wave, not to grab, just to point. At me. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root. My flashlight flew from my hand and landed in the dirt. The beam spun wildly, cutting across the trees, across the shadows, and then it went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The breathing grew louder, closer. I shut my eyes tight and prayed, "Please let this be a dream. Please let me wake up." When I opened them again, the night was still, quiet, empty, but the footprints were gone. All of them, mine too, like I had never walked there at all. To this day, I don't know what I met on that trail, but sometimes, late at night, I hear those slow, heavy footsteps outside my window, and I know the watcher is still following me. Story 10. The mountains in Shenandoah are beautiful, but they are also very old. Some people say the hills remember everything. Every step, every scream, every secret. That is where my story comes from. I had gone hiking alone, thinking I would enjoy the quiet. The trail was wide, with trees bending overhead like a green tunnel. The air smelled of wet leaves and moss. The only sound was the crunch of my boots. First, it was peaceful. Birds chirped. A stream trickled nearby. I thought, this is perfect. Just me and nature. But then I saw him. A man. He stood a little way down the trail, his back to me. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark jacket and old boots. He didn't move. He didn't look around. He just stood there, like a statue. I thought he was another hiker resting. So I slowed down and called, "Hello!" My voice echoed through the trees. He didn't answer. He didn't even turn his head. I felt a chill but kept walking. Maybe he had headphones on. Maybe he didn't hear me. As I passed, I glanced at him. His face was pale. His eyes were wide open, but they didn't blink. I walked faster. The trail curved, and soon I couldn't see him anymore. My heart was still beating fast. I told myself, don't be silly. He's just strange. Nothing more. But 10 minutes later, I saw him again. The same man, standing in the middle of the path ahead. His back to me. I froze. How did he get there? I hadn't heard footsteps. I hadn't seen anyone pass me. He hadn't moved at all. He was standing the exact same way, shoulders stiff, head tilted slightly to one side. I whispered, No, this isn't right." I stepped off the path and tried to go around through the trees. Branches scraped my arms, and thorns caught my pants. But I pushed through until I reached the trail again. I looked back. The man was gone. Relief rushed over me. Maybe he'd walked away. Maybe I was imagining things. I walked for another half hour. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long across the trail. I thought I was safe. I even started to hum to calm my nerves. Then I saw him again, closer this time, standing just a few feet away. His face was turned toward me now. His eyes were empty, like glass marbles. His mouth was shut tight, too tight, like it had been sewn closed. I stumbled back, my voice cracking. "What do you want?" He didn't answer. He didn't move. Then, slowly, his head tilted further, almost sideways like his neck was breaking. He just stared. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran. The trail blurred under my feet. My backpack bounced on my shoulders. My breath came out in ragged gasps. But no matter how far I went, I kept seeing him. Sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind me. Once, I even saw him standing between the trees, his face peeking from the shadows. Always silent, always staring. The woods grew darker. The trail seemed endless. My legs ached, but I didn't dare stop. Finally, I reached a small clearing with a wooden shelter. Relief washed over me. I thought, I'll stay here until morning. Someone will find me. I dropped my backpack and sat on the bench, shaking. The air was heavy, too quiet. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Slow. Deep. Right outside the shelter. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it toward the doorway. First, there was nothing. Just trees and shadows. Then he stepped in. The silent hiker. His body was stiff. His hands hung limply at his sides. His eyes glowed faintly in the beam, like an animal's. I screamed and ran out the back, crashing into the woods. Branches tore at my face, but I didn't stop. I ran until my legs gave out. When I looked back, I didn't see him, but I could still hear him. That slow, heavy breathing. I spent the night hiding under a fallen tree, too afraid to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him standing over me, watching. When morning came, I crawled back to the trail and found my way out. The sun felt warm, safe. People passed me, smiling, waving. They didn't know what I had seen, but I knew. The silent hiker is still there. He doesn't talk. He doesn't chase. He just appears, watching. Always ahead. Always behind. And once you see him, you never really escape. Because sometimes, at night, when I wake up in my bed, I see him standing in the corner of my room. Silent. Still. Waiting.